It's that time again. Time to take a survey. This time a pretty interesting survey from Reddit. So let's get going. So, I've been hanging around on Reddit for a couple of weeks, and I came across this survey posted to the Atheists subreddit, and I figured, what the heck? I like surveys, and there's usually something interesting in them, so I might as well give it a go. Of course, this isn't a quiz. I don't get scored whether my answers are right or wrong, but as usual with these kind of things, there are a lot of questions that can't be adequately answered yes or no. So let's take a look. Do you believe in anything that you would call a god? No. And I'm not sure that God is even a useful term because no one can show that any gods actually exist in reality. Everyone seems to have a different idea of what constitutes godhood, and until the believers can get their crap sorted and come up with a single definition of an objectively verifiable God, I'm really not interested. Did you previously believe in anything that you would call a god? Yes, I did. Back when I was young, stupid, and irrational. Back when I cared more about how I felt and not about what was demonstrably and testably true. Back before I grew the hell up, I believed in a god. Luckily, I figured that out relatively early on, and I've already told that story, so I won't go back into it again. Let's just say it isn't something that I miss at all, and move on. At what age did you most recently stop believing in something you would call a god? Now, to be honest, I don't know exactly because it was a long process where I stopped believing a little bit at a time until I realized that I just didn't believe any of it anymore. So I picked 21, although it could have been earlier or later to reach that exact moment. What were the causes of the most recent change? I discovered that my religious beliefs were not objectively verifiable. Okay, I did make a typo, sue me. But that was the whole reason. I wanted to believe as many true things and reject as many false things as I could, and know how to tell the difference between the two, and thanks to Matt Dillahunty for the general phrasing of that sentiment. How many times have you switched to and from this belief? Once. Okay, maybe it was technically twice, because we're all born without any religious beliefs and have to be indoctrinated into them, but since it isn't a conscious decision, I really don't think that counts. I actually moved from religion to non-religion once, and I was never stupid enough to go back. Would you describe yourself as currently being religious? No, not a bit. Anti-religious? Yes. Just not anything that could be conceivably considered religious. Would you describe yourself as previously being religious? Very, and I mean it. I took it all very, very seriously. I absolutely believed what my religion taught me. I absolutely prayed regularly. I read my Bible daily, and I was absolutely positively certain that God was real. I felt God's presence in my life, or at least what I thought was God's presence, until I understood that the mind can make things feel real that simply are not. Would you describe the people who raised you as currently being religious? No, they're not. In fact, for at least some of them, I'm happy to have been the impetus for them giving up religious adherence. But that's a story I've also told, and I'm not going to go back into it. Would you describe them as being previously religious? Yes. I don't know that they were as devout as I was because I really took it seriously. But certainly they went through the motions and certainly seemed to believe. But I can't know because I don't know what was going on in their heads. Do I participate in activities that I consider religious? Nope. Hell, you couldn't even get me out of bed early on a Sunday if you tried. But I have no interest in or practice anything remotely religious, period. Certainly I did back when I was a believer. I mean, I went to church several times a week. I was involved in Christian youth groups. I was part of Christian Bible studies, etc. And finally, what religious text have I read? There is no way I can include them all because I've read tons and tons and tons and tons of them. I mean, I've read the Egyptian Book of the Dead for crying out loud. And if you want to throw it in, the Necronomicon if you want to get silly about it. What do you think morality is? Well, my response was a system of control promoted for social benefit. I probably should have said system of control for individuals, but it really works both ways. Morality isn't anything special. It simply allows individuals within a society to cooperate and not kill each other most of the time. Morality doesn't require imaginary friends in the sky. It doesn't require authoritarian force. It is something that people are raised with and largely indoctrinated into for the betterment of society. So what moral system do I use? I don't know that there's a name for it. So I just said rationality and realism. I accept reality as it is. I don't try to make something else based on my feelings. And I treat people the way I want to be treated. All morality is based on enlightened self-interest. People ought to deal with that. Do I believe objective moral standards exist? No. In fact, I fail to understand how they even could. Where would they even come from? If you're going to pretend that there's a God, then moral standards would still be subjective because they would come from said God. They would come from that God's personal opinions. That's not objective. Objective standards have to come from outside of everyone. So that's kind of a silly question when you think about it. Do I think that actions or standards can be determined to be moral or immoral objectively, regardless of whether the standards are objective? No. I mean, just look at how many different interpretations of morality there are around the world. Even people who start with the same supposed standards for morality come to entirely different conclusions of what is moral and what is not. So, no. What do I think justice is? Well, in the same vein, it's a social convention, specifically within the law, for maintaining societal health and well-being. I don't know that there's really much of a gulf between morality and justice when you think about it. Do I believe that justice is subjective? Yes, at least in the broad strokes. Now, once your society decides what is just, I think they ought to apply those standards evenly, but how you get to justice, that's entirely subjective. What do you think truth is? Objectively determining what is factually correct in the real world. The idea that everyone has their own truth is absurd. Something is either true or it is false. You can't decide that something that is false is true, no matter how much you wish it was, and you can't decide that something that is true is false either. The only exception here is something entirely within yourself. My favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate, can be true or false and change over time, because there's no objective fact to be found here. Otherwise, no. Truth is what it is. What do you think knowledge is? It's coming to an understanding of what is true in factual reality. It is not subjective. Something is true or it is false. You cannot pretend to have knowledge of something that is inherently and factually incorrect. That's not how knowledge works. But I do think that all knowledge is knowable, at least potentially. That isn't to say that we know all truth, or that we will ever know all truth, but there is no truth that is inherently beyond our grasp, regardless of circumstances. Now, on to politics, I guess. Do you believe that there should be a separation of religion and government? Not just yes, but hell yes. Religion has no place in governance at all. If you want to believe in imaginary friends in the sky, at least have the good sense to leave that garbage at the door when you show up for work in the morning. You can pick it up again on your way out, because nobody else wants it. What political parties or independents do I support? Well, none. I might be a lifetime registered Republican, but that doesn't mean I like the Republicans any more than I like the Democrats, any more than I like the Libertarians or other independent parties. I don't support groups. I support people, and only those who operate rationally. How much do I feel that my ideals match with the left wing? Well, what I said is probably higher than it should be, but because I'm a secular conservative, there are some ideas on the moderate left that I'm fine with. Not the far left, the moderate left. And likewise, because I reject religion, I disagree with people on the far religious right. The more moderate right, I'm much more in agreement with them, but the further you go to the extremes on either side, the more I am going to disagree. And while I'm not an authoritarian, I'm not an anarchist either. We do need authorities and rules and regulations to keep society functioning. And libertarian ideas? Well, I guess it depends on what those are. Because most worthwhile libertarian ideas are actually conservative ideas. Those things that I identify as solely libertarian, I tend to think of those as pretty much insane. I do think egalitarianism is needed, the promotion of equality of opportunity for all, but not equality of outcome is necessary for a functional society. And yes, to a certain degree, nationalism is certainly necessary. If you don't care about the country you call home, then what impetus do you have to work toward improving it? If you can just keep moving to different nations and driving them all into the ground, pretty soon they're all going to be terrible. Why would anybody want to allow that? Do you think governments are needed? It doesn't really matter because governments of some kind will arise out of the chaos no matter what anyone thinks. Even in Somalia, where there is no central government, society is presided over by various warlords. There will always be leaders and there will always be followers. That's how humanity works. I also think taxation to a certain degree is necessary, at least for things that we all need, but which are absurdly expensive to fund individually. We need roads, we need infrastructure, we need police and firefighters, and no matter what kind of crazy libertarian nonsense people say, taxation is not theft. It's really kind of a silly question. And of course, we need private property. I can't imagine a world where there's no such thing as private property at all. I mean, for anything. You can have no belongings that are yours. If someone wants your iPhone, they can take it. If somebody wants to use your toothbrush, they can. That's ridiculous. But we also need public property, such as the aforementioned roads. You can't have everything public, and you can't have everything private. Functional societies require both. Demographics. I was born in and still live in the United States, although I've been to quite a few other countries at one point in time or the other. I've never lived in any other countries, nor have I had the slightest interest in doing so. And I find this funny, but it asks what ethnicity I identify with, but it doesn't list any. No, I don't identify with any ethnicities, but if I did, I'd have to fill it in with other. What races do I identify with? Likewise, none. I don't care. It is entirely irrelevant to me, and I really have no respect for people who give a damn about race at all. The only race I care about is the human race. From there it goes into a bunch of meaningless questions about height and weight and stuff like that means nothing at all to atheism, so I don't know why they include it. Yada yada yada, sex, gender, have you stepped foot in a classroom? Sorry, skipping ahead. So, let's get to relationships. Have your beliefs impacted your relationships with your immediate family? And the answer is no. My rejection of religion had really no impact whatsoever. I never feared that my family would toss me out into the street if I didn't follow their imaginary friends. It also hasn't affected my relationships with my extended family, most of whom couldn't care less about religion, at least outwardly. Now, I do have an aunt and uncle who pissed everybody off in the family because they were hyper-religious assholes and nobody could stand them. They even drove their own son away the second he could get out from under their roof. But other than that, and that wasn't my beliefs but theirs, I've really seen no issues. And since my wife's parents are atheists, it didn't bother them either. The whole thing never even came up. And it didn't with my friends either. I mean, if someone has an issue, then we don't need to stay friends. That never happened, even though I had friends, even really good friends, who were religious after I deconverted. And to be honest, I wound up deconverting them too. I don't know of any friends that I currently have who believe in any gods, at least not openly. I also have no problems in the workplace because religion isn't a topic for discussion there. Keep your silly beliefs at the door. We're here to work, not preach. Have my beliefs impacted my relationships with my community? Not that I can identify, because religion simply never comes up. Other than the very, very, very rare occasional idiot that comes to the door with a pamphlet, religion is a complete non-issue around here. So, that was it. The Atheism subreddit survey of stuff. And it was surprisingly non-eventful, considering that I've taken a lot of these where I've had major problems even answering the questions. There was some weird phrasing here and there and some strange questions, but overall, whoever came up with this did a pretty good job, all things considered. Of course, the question has to be, what does any of this prove? It's probably just going to be a, here's the demographics of the people who happen to take the survey. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but I doubt there's going to be any real surprises here, or anything that disagrees with the broad strokes set out in the Pew Research surveys or whatever. But I'm happy to throw in a couple of minutes of my time to help out whatever they're trying to do, and to see if there's anything interesting to spur discussions over here on the channel. So this is your time to speak up. What did you think? Agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. Go take the survey yourself if it's still up, or post your answers below. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified of new videos. We all know that YouTube is silencing voices like mine and not notifying subscribers of new content. It's important that you stay informed, not just of my channel, but of the facts. Because otherwise, we all lose, and that's not something we can ever allow to happen.